that upstairs, end quote. When a study was made a few years ago on runaway wives, what do you think was discovered to be the main reason they fled? It was, quote, lack of appreciation, end quote. And I mean, that's a whole nother rabbit hole conversation in itself. We'll have it at another time. And I would love to just wait until my good Lord King husband is available. Maybe we could play a clip of it and he and I can discuss it and we'll see. Hold. All right, let's continue on as long as my voice will sustain. It will get better. And we're so excited about being able to run the pellet stove. Let's keep going. And I might split this up into 3 parts. We'll see. All right. When a study was made and we're talking about wives here, Mr. Carnegie is commenting on wives, a study they conducted. And again, I'd like to see the number that was included in this study, the demographic. There are a lot of things to consider. And let's also remember the era, the time period. This was released in 1936. So all the information, he said was a decade or more in the making. Let's keep going. Sorry, I keep coughing in your ear. I'll try to keep that down. All right. When a study was made a few years ago on runaway wives, I guess that's what they were called, what do you think was discovered to be the main reason they fled? It was, quote, lack of appreciation, end quote. I bet that a similar study made of runaway husbands would come out the same way, if not more. If not more. We often take our spouses so much for granted that we never let them know we appreciate them. And I will say, my husband is number one, the King of Kings in giving his good queen, myself, wife, praise. He is amazing. And he lifts everyone up. He respects women all the way around. And I mean, I couldn't have done better in that department. All right, let's keep going. All right. A member of one of our classes told of a request made by his wife. She and a group of other women in her church were involved in a self-improvement program. She asked her husband to help her by listing 6 things he believed she could do to help her become a better partner. Oh, what a brave thing to ask of one's spouse. I think I'll ask it of my husband. That is hard feedback to give your spouse. He reported to the class, quote, I was surprised by such a request. Frankly, it would have been easy for me to list 6 things I would like to change about her. My heavens. She could have listed 1,000 things she would like to change about me, but I didn't. I said to her, quote, let me think about it and give you an answer in the morning, end quote. That's what my husband does to me. He knows I'm easily distracted. Quote, the next morning I got up very early and called the florist and had them send 6 red roses to my wife with a note saying, quote, I can't think of 6 things I would like to change about you. I love you the way you are, end quote. I love that. Oh. That's the kind of stuff my baby does. In fact, I have some roses and flowers over there that he got from the dollar store, and they are still alive and beautiful. When I arrived at home that evening, who do you think greeted me at the door? That's right, my wife. She was almost in tears. Needless to say, I was extremely glad I had not criticized her as she had requested. The following Sunday at church, after she had reported the results of her assignment, several women with whom she had been studying came up to me and said, quote, that was the most considerate thing I have ever heard, end quote. It was then I realized the power of appreciation, end quote. I like it. I like it. I like it. Marriages are unique. Marriages are unique because, in the Bible, it's called that, divorce is not an option. And what do you do when divorce is not an option? Well, you keep at it. You keep at it. All right. One moment. All right, let's get through this, guys. Sorry, I keep pausing and all of that. I will turn my camera on for a second just so you can see my face. Hey. So I'm going to do my hair and stuff today. We have a show to do tonight. I've said it in the earlier content. So let me get through this. I'm going to turn the camera back off. Anyway, you guys, thank you for joining us. And if you're liking this content, please hit that like, share, and subscribe. And I do highly recommend running out and grabbing a copy of this book. And no, I would not make it my I would not make a shrine to it and idolize it, but it is good to read it and consider the things, because especially the marriage reference is really important, and we can pick that apart later. And I think hubby and I do a good job of that, and especially Dr. Marjorie, don't forget her with Flying with Purpose, and I'll show all her info later. All right, guys, let's continue on. So, wow, that's pretty amazing. So, he honored his wife, and that's what we're called to do, is honor. And I'll say it like our pastor told us when I came to Christ November 1st, 2009, and in our premarital counseling, he said, it goes in this pecking order as long as you keep God in the center of everything, and it goes God, your husband, your wife, and then everything else. And there is no other order. And it's the same order because the husbands are called to love us as Jesus loved the church. And if we all know the readings of all the apostles, especially the Apostle Paul, that the churches go rogue, and they're going rogue today, and especially the pulpit leaders, please, please stop this madness. All right, let's keep going. Remember, we may be the only Bible one ever reads, and I hope that's not the case, which is why we like to read it word for word and not just from one translation. Okay, let's keep going. All right, so, everyone's getting accolades here. That's amazing. Would you believe that anyone could build a $2 million business on the power of appreciation? Because that is precisely what Alice Foot McDougall did, despite having no training or business experience and almost starting out penniless. After her husband had passed away, and with 3 young children dependent on her, she was forced to find a way to support her family. In her own words, quote, "When my husband died, I was so discouraged. I wanted to die too. One night I was actually tempted to drown myself, and I would have, if not for the sake of my children. I had to make a living for them. I didn't have the training to hold a job, so I knew my only hope was to go into business for myself," end quote. And there's more to the quote. I do want to do a huge shout out to May Musk, A Woman Makes a Plan. You guys, I think of Elon Musk in this, and and his motivation, you can hear from his first wife, Justine Musk, and she talks about their marriage and their relationship before their marriage. They were friends first. My husband and I were friends first. And, she talks about how he affected people because, he had that extra blessing and anointment from God that he actually knew what the engineers were talking about. So, if something's not working in the engineer business, you have to tell each other, hey, that's not going to work. People's lives are at stake. So she continues her quote, "My husband had been in the coffee business, and he used to make up a delicious blend we used at home. I knew there would be a market for this coffee if we could only get people to try it. I had $38, so I rented an office," and she probably did air quotes on that, "a tiny room just large enough to store coffee. I bought a tiny coffee grinder that ground a half pound at a time. And when I got an order for 50 pounds of coffee, I had to fill the machine 100 times to complete that single order." I think of Jeremy with the quartering. I'm going to snip this out and send this to you, sir. I hope this gives you great encouragement. He crafts, grows, makes his own coffee. You guys go check him out. That is Jeremy with the quartering. I'll put all of his links up here. So we are finding a way to exhort and exalt our favorite content creators. Let's keep going. Mrs. McDougall solicited customers by copying names from phone direct. Mrs. McDougall solicited customers by copying names from phone directories and sending out 100 letters a day inviting people to try her blend. It's called sales. When did we get away from that? In the beginning, the orders barely trickled in, but, quote, I was taught as a child to write thank you notes. So I applied the same courtesy in business. In each letter, I explained how much the order means to me and how eager I was to supply that customer with the coffee best suited to their taste. That's exactly what Jeremy with the quartering does. You guys go check out his coffee. I was astonished at what happened. The men in the coffee business had all prophesied that I would fail within 6 months. Yet, 2 years later, Mrs. McDougall had a thriving coffee business and later branched out into the restaurant business. How did that happen? Quote, I opened a tiny coffee shop in Grand Central Station. For months, the shop was a dismal failure. Then one day it rained, and the corridors outside my shop were packed with people who were soaking wet. I've never seen a more miserable mass of humanity. I knew how these I knew how those people felt because I had been cold and wet myself. I wanted to show them my honest appreciation for what they were feeling. And so, on an impulse, I had my waffle iron sent from home and served coffee and waffles for free. My daddy would have called me insane for doing that, but we would do that. We began to serve them every day after that, but the demand was so great that we had to charge for them. Quote, those free waffles turned my business into a success. And in 5 months, we had a line half a block long. At the end of 5 years, I had built 6 restaurants and my business was worth $500,000. Nobody needed to tell Mrs. McDougall the value of appreciation. Oh, this is so cool. Okay, guys, we just have a couple of pages left. Nor did anyone need to tell it to Florence Ziegfeld. In the early part of the 20th century, Ziegfeld was the most spectacular entrepreneur who had ever dazzled Broadway, and he gained his reputation by his subtle ability to, quote, glorify the American girl, end quote. Time after time, he recruited average looking young women, not great beauties or stunning head turners, to be in his fabulous productions. Yet these, quote, average girls were transformed into glamorous visions of mystery and seduction who captivated their audiences. People from all walks of life thronged to see them each night in Ziegfeld's follies, and many, quote, Ziegfeld girls, quote, end quote, such as Barbara Stanwyck, Betty Davis, and Joan Blundell later launched successful movie careers. Ziegfeld had taken, quote, ordinary, end quote, American girls and turned them into spectacular stars. He was practical as well. He raised the salary of chorus girls from $35 a week to as high as $175 a week. That is amazing. That is truly amazing. All right, let's continue on. So he was practical as well. He raised the salary of chorus girls from $35 a week to as high as $175. And he was chivalrous. On opening night at the Follies, he sent a telegram to each star in the cast and deluged every girl in the chorus line with American Beauty roses. That's so beautiful. Sounds like a King Solomon almost. I once scrambled to the fat of fasting and went for 6 days and nights without eating. It wasn't difficult. I was less hungry at the end of the 6th day than I was at the end of the second. Yet I know, as do you, people who would think they had committed a crime if they let their families or employees go for 6 days without food. Yet they will let them go for 6 days and 6 weeks and sometimes 6 years without giving them the hearty appreciation that they crave almost as much as they crave food. When Alfred Lunt, one of the great actors of his time, played the leading role in Reunion in Vienna, he said, quote, "There is nothing I need so much as nourishment for my self-esteem." End quote. We nourish the bodies of our children and friends and employees, but how seldom do we nourish their self-esteem? We provide them with nutritious food to build energy, but we neglect to give them kind words of appreciation that would sing in their memories for years, like the music of the morning stars. Some readers are saying right now as they read these lines, quote, "Hogwash, stop. It's just flattery. I've tried that and it doesn't work. Not with intelligent people." End quote. Of course, flattery seldom works with discerning people. It is shallow, selfish, and insincere. It ought to fail, and it usually does. True, some people are so hungry, so thirsty for appreciation that they will swallow anything, just as a starving man will eat grass and fish worms. Even Queen Victoria, even Queen Victoria was Even Queen Victoria was susceptible to flattery. Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli confessed that he put it on thick in dealing with the Queen. To use his exact words, he, quote, "spread it on with a trowel," end quote. But Disraeli was one of the most polished and deft men who ever ruled the far flung British Empire. What worked for him wouldn't necessarily work for you and me. In the long run, flattery will do you more harm than good. Flattery is counterfeit. And like counterfeit money, it will eventually get you into trouble if you pass it to someone else. I agree. The difference between appreciation and flattery? Simple. One is sincere, the other insincere. One comes from the heart out, the other from the teeth out. One is unselfish, the other selfish. One is universally admired, the other universally condemned. I recently saw a bust of the Mexican hero, General, parentheses, and later President, parentheses close, Alvaro Obregón in the Chapultepec Palace in Mexico City. Below the bust are carved these wise words from his philosophy, quote, "Don't be afraid of enemies who attack you. Be afraid of friends who flatter you." No, no, no. I am not suggesting flattery. Far from it. I am talking about a new way of life. Let me repeat. I am talking about a new way of life. So, and all of that, I am talking about a new way of life is all italicized. King George V had a set of 6 maxims displayed on the walls of his study at Buckingham Palace. One of these said, quote, "Teach me neither to proffer nor receive cheap praise," end quote. That's all flattery is, cheap praise. I once read a definition of flattery that may be worthy repeating. Quote, "Flattery is telling the other person precisely what he thinks about himself." End quote. If all we had to do was flatter, everybody would catch on and we would all be experts in human relations. When we are not engaged in thinking about some definite problem, we usually spend about 95% of our time thinking about ourselves. Now, if we stop thinking about ourselves for a while and begin to think of the other person's good points, we wouldn't have to resort to flattery so cheap and false that it can be spotted almost before it is out of the mouth. One of the most one of the most neglected virtues of our daily existence is appreciation. Somehow We neglect to praise our daughter or son when she or he brings home a good report card, and we fail to encourage our children when they first succeed in building a birdhouse or baking brownies. Nothing pleases children more than this kind of parental interest and approval. The next time you enjoy an exceptional meal dining out, send word to the chef that it was excellently prepared. When a tired salesperson shows you unusual courtesy, please mention it. Yes, let's do that. Every minister, lecturer, and public speaker knows the discouragement of pouring themselves out to an audience and not receiving a single ripple of appreciative comment. What applies to professionals applies doubly to workers in offices, shops, and factories, and to our families and friends. In our relations at work, we should never forget that all our associates are human beings and hunger for appreciation. It is the legal tender that all souls enjoy. Try leaving a friendly trail of little sparks of gratitude on your daily trips. You will be surprised how they will set small flames of friendship that will be rose beacons on your next visit. Hurting people not only does not change them, it is never called for. There's an old saying that I have cut out and pasted on my mirror where I cannot help but see it every day. Quote, I shall pass this way but once. Any good, therefore, that I can do, or any kindness that I can show to any human being, let me do it now. Let me not defer nor neglect it, for I shall not pass this way again. End quote. The great philosopher Ralph Waldo Emerson said, quote, every man I meet is my superior in some way, in that I learn of him. End quote. If that was true of Emerson, isn't it likely to be 1,000 times more true of you and me? Let us cease thinking of our accomplishments, our wants. Let us try to figure out the other person's good points. Then forget flattery. Give honest, sincere appreciation. Be, quote, hearty in your approbation and lavish in your praise. Parentheses close. And people will cherish your words and repeat them over a lifetime. Repeat them years after you have forgotten them. Principle 2, give honest and sincere appreciation. And I have to agree with that with 1,000,000%. And it's backed up biblically as well. So I'm glad I finished reading, because a lot of people would have put it down with some of the quotes that were in there, not given it its due diligence and gone through the whole of it. You guys, thank you so much for joining me here on BBM Bobina's Book Nook, and we will see you next time right here for part 3. And let me go ahead and tell you what part 3 is. I have it marked off. He who can do this has the whole world with him. He who cannot walks a lonely way. Well, I wonder what that one's going to be about, because we, as followers of Christ, we're told we're going to walk in a lonely way, but I don't think that we are. All right, you guys, thank you for joining me. We'll see you next time.
And touch the sound of silence, and in the naked